Алоха на сите, вистински работи. И добре дојдовте на петтиот поред InTech meetup. Моето име е Ана и во името на организаторите денеска ќе бидам ваша домакинка. Тоа сум јас овде под ова very flattering плаво светло, над. Многу се радувам дека ви има во волку голем број. Ние денеска ја продолжуваме приказната која што започна со првиот митап на ова исто место пред скоро 2 години. Денеска имаме тројца спикери, вуала, од мојата лева страна, кои ќе зборуваат за open source. Имајќи во предвид дека ви има во волку голем број, а дека надвор е сонце и има фантастично време, можевте да одбирате да бидете во парка, сте тука, предпоставувам дека ова е тема која што вас навистина ве интересира, па затоа се надевам дека откако нашите спикери ќе завршат, ќе имаме една жива дискусија со Q&A кои што ќе доаѓаат од ваша страна. Презентациите на говорниците, како и Q&A сесијата, ќе бидат на англиски јазик, затоа јас сега ќе се префрлам да зборувам на англиски, за да не биде на сите многу полесно овде да се разбираме. So, welcome to the 5th InTech meetup. Can we have a round of applause, please? This time we will be talking about open source. Why? Well, simply because the open source software is celebrating its 20th anniversary. Yes, it's been 20 years since the open source definition based on the Debian free software guidelines was published. From the original definition, the idea of free as in freedom, not price, software was born. In part because of the open source definition, plenty of game-changing software has been developed and is, as we speak, being developed all around the world. Today we have 3 speakers, after which we will have a Q&A session, but please, if you feel compelled to join the discussion at any point in time, feel free to use the hashtag InTech meetup on social media. Before we move on to the most interesting part of this evening, and that is our speaker speaking, we just need to say hi to our sponsors, without whom this evening would not be possible at all. So please give a round of applause for Cognizam, Стопанска банка, Ада Скопје, Massive Interactive, and Pivara Skopje. And keep that going for our supporters, IT.com MK, Startup Macedonia, Semos Education, Pixel, Radio MOV, Metropolis Radio Network, Smart Portal MK, Brainster, and Reborn. I think it's about... Yes, thank you. Thanks. I think it's about time we get started, so let's pass the torch to our first speaker, who, since he found Linux in 1993, has been a fierce fighter for more open on every level, as a developer of open source projects, as a lobbyist, and as an activist. But it's not only software. He also runs a 3D printer at home, or so he says, is a transnational immigration officer, and a known speaker at various conferences and events as such. Everybody, please welcome Jan Wildeboer.
Is on. Ah, wonderful. So I will not try to impress you with my completely perverted, broken version of trying to pronounce your language in any way. I speak English and I offer my apologies for that. So I hope that's fine. My name is Jan Wildeboer. I'm, as you can see, I work for a company called Red Hat. And Red Hat is a company that was actually created before the term open source even existed. Which is the interesting part, because before we had the term open source, we also had the term free software, and this goes all back a very long time, back into the 80s and even before that. We'll get to that in a second. My job at Red Hat is more or less what I'm doing right now, talking to people and explain to them that Microsoft is over and Oracle is over and everything is open source and you better get used to it. My job title is evangelist. It's kind of the most weirdest thing to do at Red Hat. I was started 13 years ago in 2005 as a pre-sales guy, doing technology explanation, all that kind of stuff. I did consulting, And after 2 years, my vice president told me, Jan, you're the worst pre-sales Red Hat has ever hired. You talk too much, you never do your expenses, you never write your follow-ups, you completely suck. But on the other hand, when you talk to people, they start to understand what open source is really about, which is good for us because ultimately we sell more subscriptions, which is more revenue for Red Hat. So let's make that your job. And I'm like, okay, fine, make me evangelist. So I said to my manager, so what I'm going to get is more money, I don't have to file my expenses, I can travel wherever I want, and I can talk about whatever I want, and I can even get paid for it. Yeah, okay, cool. So if you're ever looking for a cool company, Red Hat, we're hiring. So, but let's leave that aside. I was not here to talk about Red Hat as a company. It's about the history of open source, which is a very long and interesting history. I'll try to make it extremely short, but I think there are some things that we need to know. So first of all, the Linux kernel, from the time it was created, that's already a long time ago, there are people in this room, young people, who were born after the Linux kernel was first published, which always is mind-bending to me. When I started working on the Linux kernel in 1993, it was just a little bit. I had a graphic card that didn't work, and I wrote a patch to do it, and the kernel hackers told me I'm an idiot because the code is not good enough. But at least I tried, and it worked somehow. But now we have people that have not seen a world without free software and the Linux kernel and all of that surrounding it at work. That's kind of a milestone. It's really important for me. And the term open source was created, interestingly, by a group of people who thought that the term free software was not good enough for them. We had the term free software freedom. Richard Stallman, everybody, I guess, or some people here might have heard of Richard. He was the founder of the Free Software Foundation, the GNU General Public License, la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di, long story. And then there was this company in the US called Netscape Communications, and they were almost bankrupt. They were not doing very well, and they decided as a last-ditch effort to save their reputation, they want to make the source code of their browser, the Netscape Communicator. Anyone remember Netscape Communicator? 4.75, this website is best viewed. Oh God, let's not go there. So they decided to make the source code available, but they didn't want to call it free software because they thought Richard Stallman and his people, they're fundamentalists and they're crazy and we don't want to be associated with them. So they put 5 people in a room in Palo Alto to find a new term. And these 5 people was 3 men and 2 women. They sat together for 2 days and decided, what are we going to do? Effectively, we want to do the same as free software from the philosophy, sharing code and all that kind of stuff. But we want to call it completely different so that nobody confuses it and we get invited to conferences and we get the free beer and the pizza and all that kind of stuff. And they came up with a term, it was Christine Patterson. For years and years, people told you that Bruce Perens and Eric S. Raymond came up with the term open source. It's wrong, it was Christine Patterson. Christine, however, being a smart woman, decided for a very long time that she doesn't want the world to know that she invented the term because she knows how evil the internet can be to women that are smart. So last year, or beginning of this year, she decided to finally set history straight. It's an article you can read on opensource.com which explains the full history of open source. That's the history part, and it's good to know. But let's look a little bit deeper on what this all really means. Where does this come from? It comes from a very old principle, a principle that is behind every religion on this planet. It's the principle of reciprocity. It's called the golden rule in philosophy. Richard Stallman looked at this problem a long time ago, and he saw that people were trying to separate the developers from the users, that it's not one thing. And he said this is wrong because the golden rule requires that if I like software, I must be able to work with it. The golden rule in its simplest form says, do to other people what you want to see happening to yourself. I mean, this is something we all learn as children, and some people forget about it when they grow up, and some people never really understand it. But the point is, the principle of reciprocity and software make a lot of sense because software is nothing special. Let's be honest about this. All of the software developers here who think they are magicians and wizards and etc. No, you're moving bits and bytes through a CPU. That's all you do. Software is not that special. But it's relevant. It drives the whole world. We have moved from a world where machines were made specifically for stuff into a world where we are now, where everything more or less is software defined. Software is becoming the crucial factor. And with software, we run into a lot of problems, and these were the problems that Stallman and his people already saw a long time ago. And they said, what we need to do is we need to work together. We need to share this stuff, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel everywhere. We have to do this together. And to do this together, you need a set of rules. So both open source and free software have a set of principles and rules. The open source rules you can find at the Open Source Foundation, and at their Open Source Initiative website, blah, 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 Free Software Foundation over there. The point is, we started this work at a time where people called us crazy. I'll give you a concrete example of that. When I joined Red Hat in 2005, one of my first customers I visited was a very big Swiss bank, a very big Swiss bank. They were running everything with Sun Solaris. Who here remembers Sun and Solaris? See? You know your history, huh? Yeah. So Sun Solaris, and I was sitting there, and they asked me, can you do a presentation of this Linux stuff? And I was like, okay, I'll present the Linux stuff. So I did a 6 hours demonstration, Red Hat Enterprise Linux and satellite and updating, kickstarting, all that fancy stuff. And at the end of it, the CTO of this very big Swiss bank looked at me and he said, Mr. Wildeboer, that's a really interesting demonstration you showed us here. Huh? It's a really cool technology, huh? But I've talked to my lawyers, I talked to the legal department at our big Swiss bank, and they told me that Linux is a communist project. You are socialists trying to take property away from us capitalist people. And I was like, okay, I'm standing here representing a publicly traded American company, and I'm a communist. Fine, cool. So we didn't make the deal. In the middle of the financial crisis, I came back to that same bank. It was 2008. The world was falling apart. Everybody was crying. People were killed in the street. You know, you all remember the times. And I was at the same bank, new CTO, and again, did a complete demonstration of everything we can do with Red Hat and everything. And he said to me, yeah, Mr. Wildeboer, this is interesting, but what is your big argument? And I said, well, you know, your predecessor told me I'm a communist. And the CTO looked at me, really? He said that? And I said, yeah, no, here's the thing. Now we're in 2008, and 90% of the stock exchange markets on this planet run on Linux. 90%, the heart of capitalism, runs on communist software. How's that, Mr. Bank? We didn't make the deal. 2 years later, this Swiss bank got bought by an American bank, and they had a Red Hat only policy, so now they're big friends of mine. The point I'm trying to make here is, it's not only about software and about licensing. There is a bigger change happening, and this bigger change is what I focus on in my job. It's a cultural change. It's a philosophical change in the way we work with data, with computers, and everything. When we look at where we are today, so right now everybody is joking about the GDPR. Yeah, you see all these fancy jokes everywhere. I got a message in a bottle after 100 years, and all it says is, we updated our privacy policy. So funny. The point behind the GDPR is a growing responsibility for privacy, for data ownership, and etc. And I'm not claiming that's a direct result of open source, but I'm saying open source plays a very important role in this, because open source allows people to actually look at how this stuff works. When you go back in time, you know, let's go back to the 1990s, when Tim Berners-Lee, end of the 90s, he invented what we now call the World Wide Web. And he did that because he was working at the CERN in Geneva, and you know, they were building the Large Hadron Collider, and the Large Hadron Collider would build a minuscule black hole, and that would eat Geneva, and then the rest of the world is, you know, all these religious people told me this. But what he saw, what his problem was, is at CERN there were people coming in from all across the world doing their research at CERN, and then they left after a year or half a year, depending on how long their research was. And they wanted to stay in contact and get access to the new data that was generated, because maybe it would help their research also in the future. But they couldn't. At that time, the internet as we know it simply didn't exist. At that time, you had very weird methods of sending data around, stuff like CompuServe and AOL and Minitel in France and all these other weird systems. It took Tim Berners-Lee, the definition of the internet, of the web, put that on top of TCP/IP, and Tim is very British. Let's keep it at that. He is not the most humble person, let's be very friendly. When he announced HTTP and HTML, he immediately said, this will change the world. And at that time, when I saw the announcement for the first time, I was still studying at university, I was like, is this guy crazy? You know, piece of shitty software doesn't even really work. How is that going to change the world? Unfortunately, he was totally right. It changed everything. Nowadays, we have internet access on our mobile phones. Whatever thing you have in your pocket is connected to the internet, and you can take data from there, send data, do it, and all that. That's a revolution that is so natural to us. You know, historians will see this in 20 years. They will say, whoa, this was the time where everything changed. And they will see that open source and the way of thinking of open source is at the core of this. What we are seeing now, and we is not only Red Hat, it's not only the corporate world, it's really all the people that care about open source. What we see are some fundamental drastic changes. I give you a number, just read it a few hours ago. Black Duck is an American company that do a lot of very crazy research on the use of open source and how absolutely dangerous and insecure it is if you do not have a contract with Black Duck. You know, don't believe them. But they just published, they do research, so companies send source code of their proprietary software to them, and they analyze that for security risks and all of that kind of stuff. And they found out that from the 1,100 applications that they have in that system from a lot of different companies, 96% use open source components. The amount of source code, when you look per application and you look at how many lines of code are coming straight from open source projects and how many have been written by this company itself, the percentage of open source code in these applications is 57. 57% of the source code of commercial applications is completely based on open source, and it is open source. In the IoT world, the Internet of Things, it's even, when you listen to Black Duck, they would say worse. When you listen to me, I would say better. They have more than 70% code that is open source. Let me tell you this, after these 20 years of the term open source, the war is over. We have won. Proprietary software is going to the history bin. It's over, it's done, history. Even the people at Microsoft start to understand it. They now claim to be my best friend. I've been fighting them for 20 years. I was on their blacklist. I was not allowed to be at any Microsoft event. And now suddenly they turn around and they tell everyone, oh yeah, Jan Wildeboer, I know him since years. Good guy, good guy. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. The cultural change is happening in our minds. I don't know how many people here in the room are software developers or in the widest sense, or front-end developers or whatever. But nowadays, you know, the tool chain we use to create software is completely, not necessarily completely open source, but based on open source principles. We share the code wherever we can. We take shared code from other people wherever we can. We help other people wherever we can. From a commercial perspective, you might think this is crazy. Why do companies do this? I can tell you from experience, my customers at Red Hat, they don't really care if it's open source or not. They don't care about licenses. They care about good solutions and at a good price. But they see that open source delivers better solutions, so that's why they fall for it. And with that, they brought in new developers into their organizations over the past 10 years that have grown up inside the organizations, that are now managers, that now have budget decisions, but they keep their way of thinking with them. So now you see companies that understand the core principle of software. As I said at the very beginning, IT is very boring, and most of the time it's just software. So if you are whatever organization, company, you know, whatever goodwill organization, I don't care. Your IT stack, if it's this size roundabout, is more or less completely based on software. Software-defined networking, software-defined storage, software-defined this, software-defined that. Hardware is commoditized. Everybody runs their stuff on Amazon or Azure or on their own machines, whatever. And it's more or less the same everywhere. So this is your software-defined stack. What people are recognizing, and now slowly but surely the managers recognize this, there's maybe 20% on top of that, maybe 20%, that is very specific to your organization, to your company, that generates margin or value, that is really a secret that you need to protect your company. But 80% of the functionality in your IT stack is completely non-competitive. It's the same stuff everybody needs. So if everybody uses the same functionality in that 80%, why don't they work together on solving these issues? GDPR, perfect example for that. GDPR tells you how to treat, you know, data of your customers and how to protect it and all that kind of stuff. So everybody has to implement it, at least in the European Union, and let's not go into legal details. Everybody needs to care about this stuff. but they all have to do the same thing. The law is for everyone, so there's not really a difference. Instead of everyone developing their own little solution that they then have to maintain for a very long time, that they have to care about, that they have to invest in, why don't you all start working together on this and create the abstraction layers needed? Because it's non-competitive. The law demands it, you have to do it anyway. So why not make it cheaper? If 5 companies decide to work together that way, their investment into this functionality just dropped 80%. And if it's 100 companies doing that, effectively there's almost no investment anymore. So from a commercial perspective, open source makes a lot of sense, and this is what we're seeing and this is what we're hoping for. It's long gone the time that open source and free software was the meeting of weird people that sang the free software song. Who here can actually sing the free software song? There is a free software song written by Richard Stallman himself. I can teach it to you. I mean, I still have 10 minutes. So, no, let's go there. Free the software. No. This was the image we had for a very long time, that open source and free software are somehow crazy people that believe in the good of the world, but yeah, you know, they're computer hackers, so let's not really take them serious. No, we have grown beyond that. Now the whole movement of open knowledge, open data, open everything is everywhere. You know, I came to Red Hat in 2005 after I was fighting against software patents. You know, software patents are the biggest evil on this planet and they should burn in hell with fire. And I was part of a little political group that managed to kill the European Union directive on software patents in 2005. And 2 weeks after we did that, we were only 5 people, and we were fighting against Microsoft, Siemens, Philips, all these big companies with millions of lobby money. We had 40,000 euro. For the conspiracy theorists in the room, the 40,000 euro we had at that time came from the personal pockets of George Soros. So after we won that war, I got a call from Red Hat where the manager effectively said, I don't give a shit what you do, but next week you start working for Red Hat. And I said, it's not that simple, we need to talk about money. He said, yeah, we double. And I'm like, okay, fine, you didn't even ask what I earn right now, but I can tell you how much I'm going to earn. So I was the most expensive pre-sales. But the point is, this political stuff and etc. is extremely relevant for all of the open source world and the rest. We talk to governments. I talk to governments about open standards, not about open source. Open source is irrelevant in that regard. It's about open standards, making data accessible to get it out of these silos so that people can start working with it. And governments start to understand this. It's a lot of work. You know, you're talking to politicians who print out their emails in the morning and trying to explain to them how XML is just XML but not a data format, and they're like, yeah, but my man, no, whatever. It made me half an alcoholic, I can tell you. You have to drink a lot of beer in Brussels, but okay, that's fine. We are now at the stage where the revolution has happened without anybody noticing. We are at the stage where everything is software defined, where everybody takes in open source without really thinking about it, where companies start to recognize what they are doing and they see the problems with that, but also what they need to do to change that so that they can bring their developers up to speed to commit code back to upstream so that the upstream projects then can help more and more people. That forking everything for your own internal software stack is the wrong way to go, because that 80% is not going to give you any value, so better share the hell out of it with a lot of other people and even with your direct competition so that we all have a better world. When we look at what we can do today, there's this famous joke about somebody from the 1950s time travels to today and asks, what have you done in these 50 years? What is the big thing you have reached? And then you tell them, we have created devices that are smaller than a pocketbook that connect you to the knowledge of the world, and we use it to watch cat pictures. At least we can watch cat pictures. That's something. So before I talk too long, I still have 8 minutes, correct? Wow, I'm good. What I want to give to you is one simple thing. Open source is the way we develop software since 5 years and for the next 100 or 200 years. There's no way out. It's over. The war is over. If you still work for Microsoft, good luck. Good riddance. It's fine. But even they tell that they are my best friends, so you know, we get there. If you don't understand open source and if you think it's irrelevant, also fine with me. I don't care. You know, you will be lost in history, but you know, it's good enough. And especially for countries here, I'm still confused about how I should pronounce your country. Is it Macedonia or Macedonia? The second, Macedonia. Oh, this is just political minefield. I know this stuff. And then I read that there will be a big announcement this week that after 20 years of fighting between Greece and Macedonia, it will finally be solved. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like BSD versus GPL or VI versus Emacs or whatever. It doesn't matter. Especially for countries like your country and the way this offers so many opportunities. You have access via the internet. You have access to everything that's happening out there. And you don't even have to go there. So one of the things I love about open source is how people come together from different regions and how we somehow organize everything without looking at each other. We have this in our company all the time. Most of our developers work from home, some of them in the most remote places you can imagine. One of our developers can only send us his source code update once a week when he has an internet connection because he has to put up his generator and he doesn't have enough fuel for it. It's a crazy world where you can all participate in right now, from here, without anything. There is no requirements. You just need a computer and internet access. And I think that problem is mostly solved. I was actually impressed with the internet speed here in your country compared to Munich, where I live in Germany, where we still have old copper lines. And I'm very proud to have 50 megabits per second, and I pay shitloads of money for that. And then I'm here, and everybody's like, oh, 50 megabits, oh, whatever. Good, keep it that way. Invest in this knowledge, share the knowledge to the rest of the world. We are listening, we are willing to help, etc. We need you and you need us. This is really ultimately, and I'm a little bit politically radical on this, I believe that we will end up, I'm very optimistic about the world. In 20, 30, 50 years, we will end up with the internet making us all one people on this planet and we get rid of nationalism and all that stupid shit. It's going to take a generation before we can get rid of the Nazis. We're right now fighting in Munich against them. In Munich, imagine this, where the old Nazis started, we now have new Nazis. It's crazy. But I think we can get them. We are at a point in time where the decision has already been made. Software development will be open source based. Not saying everything is open source licensed, but it will be based on the methods and the tools that we use as open source people. That's a damn good thing, a thing where many of our people have fought for a very long time. And we were ridiculed, we were laughed at, we were told there is no chance, and we simply didn't give up. We persevered through all odds because it was fun for us. We didn't do it to fight Microsoft or whatever, that's wrong. We did it because it was fun, because it allowed me to meet people, it allowed me to get invited here. And that's a damn good thing. So if there is one thing that we learned from 20 years of open source, is that's just the beginning. And that we don't really, we shouldn't really care about the heroes and the people who did all of this. We should just use these tools wherever we can and make everything better, and then I'm happy and I can still wear my red hat without feeling too ashamed about it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jan, for your words of history and wisdom. Can I say that? Next in line tonight is Visar Zainulal. He is a hacker, thinker, and software engineer with a lot of years in software development professional experience in the IT industry. His skills vary from Python, Elixir, and software design in general. He is member of Free Software Macedonia and likes to hack and share knowledge with the local Kika Hack Lab. Visar, applause. Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Visar. I'm with Free Software Macedonia, and today I'm going to talk about the latest technology on Hacker News. Not really. I'm going to talk about free and open software, open source software in Macedonia and the activities we've taken all these years. So first of all, I'm going to make a distinction what free and what is free and what is open source software. Basically, in free software, you have to think like free as in free speech. That is like libre. That is another word for free software, and not as a free in a free beer, which is gratis or another word for free beer. So what makes a free software free to use? These are the 4 basic freedoms. So if a software or a user has all these freedoms, then we can say that the software is free to use. So basically, the user has to be free to run the program, and he has to be free to modify the code. So he has to have access to the source code, and he can modify it, and he can share with his neighbor. So this is one freedom that he can that allows him to redistribute the software. And the 4th and the last freedom is the freedom to give back to community and distribute the software with the modified source code. So basically, if you've read the book Cathedral and the Bazaar by ESR or Eric Raymond, you have this distinction what is free software and open source software. Basically, Linux kernel is a free software where everything you have, everything around it is like in the Cathedral, and Fetchmail, that is a piece of software written by Rick Raymond, is like in the Bazaar, and you know, everything is more vibrant. And so in the very same book, you have the Linus law that says, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. So that is one another benefit of the free and open source software. So what is Free Software Macedonia? So we have basically 2 goals. One is to cover the free software on a technical grounds, technological and logistical grounds, and the other is to deal with the ethical part and the policy and the social influence of free software. What have we done until now is we have had many localization sprints of free software so we have translated basically the many free software into Macedonian in events such as Software Freedom Day or Install Fests, which are basically installation festivals. Many of these software is translated, so OpenOffice or LibreOffice now, or Mozilla products, GNOME, KDE, and several Linux distributions as Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, and Red Hat are translated in Macedonian. We've also collaborated with a lot of government and non-government organizations about free and open software and its usage in the public institutions. Our most memorable event was the Free Software Flood in 2004, which happened at a Microsoft event here in Skopje. Basically, the event, ironically, was called Vizia or Vision. And it was the biggest and the only event, I think, at the time. And all the IT companies participated in that event, and our fellows decided to burn a lot of CDs, thousands of them, with the Knoppix distribution, and give the CDs for free to the participants in that conference. And so that was the most memorable event, and I think it was called the software flood, not only because of the amount of CDs that were given, but because it was a rainy day, I think. Okay, so our community is mostly young people from university and from high school, IT professionals. We have a mailing list, and we communicate on the IRC channel Lugola on Freenode. Until now we have had several programs and projects. So after these activities I mentioned, the localization project stopped, and we decided to move on and started a new project, which is called Spodeli, or Share. This program had some multiple sub-programs, such as Spodeli Kino or Share Cinema, where we had some at these events we showed movies that are related to free and open source software and the ethical use of software. Also, we have been organizing events like Spodeli Znanje or Share Knowledge, at which we've had multiple public lectures about free open source software at various local schools and universities and similar. So basically we do hacking, but not in the sense of the Hollywood style hackers, you know, the guy with the hood and typing at his keyboard and that magically hacks the system. We're not that kind of hackers, and basically that is how should I say, it's an unfortunate name, because hacking doesn't relate to that activity, that illegal activity. Hacking is more like finding ways of usage of some system in ways that it wasn't intended to. So we have had hackers in Skopje. Richard Stallman was here. So can we hack Facebook accounts? No, we cannot do that. And basically all these activities converge to something really new and for Skopje at that time. Some fellows were at the C-Base hackerspace in Berlin, which is the oldest hackerspace in the world, and were inspired by that public space, and decided to do the very same here. And we opened the Hack Club Kika here in Skopje. So what does Kika mean? It's a recursive acronym. Don't we all like recursive acronyms? It means Kika is Informacija, Kultura, Autonomija, information, culture, and autonomy. So we've had mostly regular events like GNU Linux First Aid, and where we help newcomers to Linux with their problems, and they might encounter during installation of any distribution. We tried OpenBSD recently, and it's kind of scary. We also have had events like programming languages or programski jazyci, so where we share our knowledge about a new and esoteric programming language like Haskell and Rust and Elixir and stuff. At these events, interesting discussions come out, so it's good to come there and see, participate there. And the last but not the least important is share knowledge, or spodelizanje, which was the original idea of all this program, where we can share knowledge about anything, not only programming or computers, because Kika is, as it is in its name, it's not about computers and stuff. It's, you know, about free culture also, about the autonomy, and whatever you learn, you can share with us or with the others. Also, at this time, there was a conference called NSND, or Nothing is Gonna Happen, Ништа се neće dogoditi, which was similar to the biggest event of this kind, like CCC in Germany, and hackers from Balkans were gathered, and they shared knowledge about whatever new things they've learned. So recently, since then, Hack Club Kika has moved to several places. This is actually our third place we changed. Basically, that's Hack Club 3.0. And we've continued all these kind of events that I mentioned, but in a declining, so less and less people come to our events because I don't know, maybe we're not promoting it enough, or we should attract new people, newcomers from high schools and universities, and I think it's a very good way to learn things and to share whatever new knowledge you have acquired about. So our latest event about our meetup has been the sysadmin events or meetups, which have been organized at the Hack Club. Also, so as I mentioned, the programming languages and the GNU Linux first aid. So basically, all of you can follow us at blog.spodeli.org or at Lugala at Freenode IRC channel, and the mailing list here. And you can follow us about the activities that we undertake, and you can also you can join us at the new Hack Club and share whatever you new thing you've learned. So that's it for Kika and spodelizanje.
Thank you very much, Visar. Our third and last speaker for tonight is Serdar Dorujo. As a true believer in sharing the knowledge, he is an active member of the open source community. He is a long-time Rubyist and a recent member of the Crystal programming language team. He is the creator and core developer of the popular Camel web framework, of which you probably know more. Having built great teams and many projects at Turkish companies, he is now totally into remote work. At his free time, you can find him speaking at conferences around the world, practicing Japanese, or playing computer games. Serdar, the stage is yours.
Hi everyone. That's loud. Sorry. It's better. Hi everyone, again. Not loud this time. It's great to be here in Skopje. I feel like I'm at home because the culture is so close to my hometown, which is Istanbul, Turkey. It's a great place. I really love it, but it's all crowded and crazy. But still, come visit and have some real boza. Yeah, and also try this food, like the original one. I mean, you have great food here. I had enjoyed it, Like this, the first one is mante. I'm not sure about the Macedonian or Macedonian pronunciations, but we call it mante, baklava, kebab, and the last one is sarma. Those are my favorite. And this is the real boza. It's not that it's not liquid at all, and we put something we call leblebi on top of it. So it's pretty good, and I really like it. And my name is Serdar Doriol, but it's hard to pronounce. Even my mom calls me Sedo, and it happens to be the combination of my the two letters of my surname and first name, but it's just a coincidence. Just call me Sedo. And this is my handle. Be sure to reach out to me to ask anything about the open source or anything that I can help you with. And this is me, obviously, when I was not this fat and presenting at RubyConf, which was like the happiest moment of my life. And the thing is that I'm into something called Crystal. Has anyone heard Crystal here, like the language? Some of us. Has anyone ever heard of Ruby, the programming language? Good. Crystal is also a programming language. I'm a member of that. I'm also the author and the core developer of Kemal, which is a web framework for Crystal. And this, does anyone know what that logo is? Like, it's a fez, it's not a book. And I have stickers that I'm gonna put after the talk. And I work at a place called Rainforest, which is a US startup. And we do QA as automation, which is pretty cool. You should check it out. And the thing is that I like learning languages and speaking languages. And I speak Japanese, and I'm a polyglot, and it's written polyglotto, which means polyglot. Also, let's talk about open source. The first thing is that what's open source? And by the direct definition from Wikipedia, you can read this. I mean, it's directly copy and paste from Wikipedia, obviously. But the main thing is that, which is highlighted in the slides, is open and collaboration. So I focus on these parts of open source, which I think is the most important things. And the thing is that open source is, like John said, it's taking over the world, and it's making the world better, actually. So in a 2008 report, it says that we saved like $60 billion per year. And I mean, now it should be much more than that, but it's a great thing. And like John said, the war is over. We are actually taking over the world, which is pretty good. And the first thing is that being open, is some kind of a mindset. It's actually a cultural view of how you see the world. And the thing is that, which I find really fascinating and cool about being open in open source, is the thing is that it actually doesn't matter who, when, or where, which really changed a lot of things. And it actually doesn't matter because, for example, I once had someone sending a PR to Kemal from a country I didn't know it existed before. But the thing is that that kind of stuff can happen to you in everyday activities in open source, which is pretty cool. And the second most important thing is that collaboration. So if you can work in a collaborative way, which is really common in our culture, I think. And I also believe that there shouldn't be any heroes, ninjas, samurais, whatever. It's just bullshit. And it should be more like collaborative work. And you should be heroes as a team and not as single member. And the thing is that there is this thing called Linus law, and given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. And that's the most, correct thing that I actually heard, because how many of you have do code reviews per week? Like, do you guys do code reviews? I mean, it's the most important thing that I learned, that we should do code reviews, because we are all humans and we suck at writing software, because we all forget and we all do mistakes. Once you accept the fact that you suck, like everyone does, it gets easy to get your code reviewed from someone. For example, when I was working as a lead, I always reviewed my code to juniors, because they tended to be more kind of good at code reviews, because yeah, they were really active. And how to start, actually? Like, what's the best way to start doing open source? And the answer is pretty simple. Pick something you love. Like, what's the most interesting thing for you in the IT world or in programming? The thing is that that's the first question that you need to answer. And I feel like most of the people kind of miss that thing, that they don't love anything, and they mostly feel like they're just meh, I'm just working and earning money. But for me, it's more about doing what you love and going for it for real. And for me, that happened when I actually discovered Crystal. And before that, I was actually doing Ruby for like 5 years. And I still love Ruby. I still do Ruby, and I still talk about Ruby at events. But for the last 3 years, I've been evangelizing Crystal, and that's it. And the thing is that Crystal is not a Ruby. I'm just going to give you a high level of what it is. And this picture is really popular, like in recent days. And Crystal is also not a typed Ruby. It's a different language written from scratch, taking a lot of inspiration from Ruby. And the thing is that it's a language for humans and computers. In the past, we used to call it something like, we used to call Crystal like fast as C, slick as Ruby, but turned out that it's not working that well, because people mistook it as a new Ruby version. So we just changed it. And what does it mean to be a language for humans and computers? Well, the thing is that it's efficient on humans, like it's productive, and also it's efficient on computers. It consumes little resources, and it's pretty fast, unlike many other dynamic programming languages. And the thing is that how does that happen? Like, how do you actually build a new programming language? That sounds a bit hard. But the thing is that it all starts from a crazy idea, like even the wildest ones are okay. It's just about thinking first, like having a dream. So like 6 years ago, those two guys from Argentina had this idea of how can we create something like Ruby, but make it really fast that we don't want to write any other code than Ruby. So they just think of combining Ruby with LLVM. How many of you heard about LLVM? Okay, LLVM is a really cool project. You should also check it out. It's a really big thing. The main point is that all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Like these guys from Argentina were really smart, but even for big companies, building something like a really dynamic and fast language was not that easy. But like I said, if you have the courage and if you have the guts to pursue them, then somehow you're gonna make it. And 6 years ago, these two guys, and one of them is called Asteroid. His real name is Ari. He's really smart, like super smart. Written the first commit, and he pushed that to GitHub, as you can see. And after 1 year, it kind of turned into something real and not just an experiment, because even the Linux project started as an experiment and turned into something, you can't imagine like 20 years ago. So the same thing happened, and 1 year later, they had the first release. But the thing is that it was written in Ruby. For example, I'm not sure if you can see, but this is whole Ruby file structures. Like you have RSpec and you have RVM file, etc., which is just Ruby code. Turned out that writing a programming language in Ruby is not a good thing actually, because Ruby is dynamic and there are lots of penalties you have to pay. And 2 years later, like at November 2013, Crystal becomes self-hosted. How many people know self-hosted here? Like the concept. So the thing is that if a language is self-hosted, that means it's written in itself. For example, Crystal is written in Crystal, but up until it gets to the point, it was written in Ruby before. So yeah, the concept is a bit confusing, but it's pretty simple. And as you can see from this is actually, I picked this from the master branch at GitHub. So as you can see, it's like 98.1% written in Crystal. You can ignore the rest because mostly for website and some kind of LLVM binding. The point of being self-hosted is that once you know the language, you can directly contribute to it. For example, I know Ruby, I know it's good, but the thing is that when I try to contribute back to Ruby, things get weird because Ruby is written in C. And actually, even if you know good C, you have to know the C Ruby idioms to contribute to Ruby, which makes things a lot harder than it should be. But in a self-hosted language, you just, you know the language, you can just contribute back because the language is written itself. So that's really, makes things easier for new contributors and getting more stuff shipped quickly. And fast forward 2 years from November 2013. This is me having a mind explosion like April 2015 when I was still young and looking for something that feels good enough with all that criteria that I had. I found Crystal, and after that I've been into Crystal a lot. So I've been doing a lot of community stuff, going to conferences, speaking, etc. And today, that little crazy experiment turned into something really, cool and something real. So we have more than 250 contributors and more than 10,000 stars and more than actually 3,000 packages, getting like $2K US donations from the community, because Crystal is not funded by some big company. We rely on the community to actually fund us. And the thing is that we didn't have a full-time core developer before, but finally, like last month, we got enough money to fully fund the core developer working on Crystal itself. And we have a new release coming in the next week. It's gonna be the biggest release. And the point is that, so you might be wondering how to build this stuff, like how to learn all of this. It's the best way is just to build, because you're gonna learn a lot of stuff on the way. And you can't know everything from the start. So it's just about, taking the step and having the courage. So my journey, like, how did I end up here in Skopje eating baklava and having milk chocolate boza? The thing is that it's just that you have to start building something. And I started building like small stuff first in Crystal. So my first stuff was like something called Kryload, which is like Apache bench, but written in Crystal. And the second one was like building a command line HTTP server so that I didn't have to deal with weird Apache configurations later. I just built it myself. And the thing is that it's not all about code and, you know, solving technical challenges, but you also have to be into the community to actually, you know, get what's going on. So I built something called Crystal Weekly. Back then there wasn't any newsletter for the Crystal community. So I just take the lead, and that's the point. Like, if there isn't something, don't just start complaining. You can just build it and you can do it yourself. And that's the good point about the open source culture, the open source community. If something is not working or if something is not there, just go and do it. I mean, there is no one stopping you from doing whatever you want because it's open source. And if you don't like it, just fork it. Easy. And yeah, later I started building Kemal, but it kind of started as a, how do you call it, like a joke-ish way. But anyway, let me tell you the whole story. So the thing is that when I told my friends that I'm going to build a web framework, they were like, another web framework? Seriously, are you crazy? Kind of reaction from the team. But I said, why not? There isn't any good frameworks that always starts like that, right? And I said, I mean, I can build a framework, but it's okay to be inspired or get something from another project, because that's the point of open source, right? So in Ruby, we have something called Sinatra. So I just took a lot of inspiration from Sinatra and made the DSL of Kemal look like just Sinatra, because why not? And I'm coming from Ruby background, so it seems so simple. So this 5 lines of code gives you a fully working HTTP server with all that shiny stuff like caching, static files, WebSockets, JSON, a lot of, you know, common things that you find in a framework nowadays. And that's it. Like, I started this way. And the thing is that, which I learned later, is that even if you have the, you know, even if you solve the biggest technical challenges in the world, like even if you solve really big problems, it comes to the point that you have to create an identity for the project, because no one is gonna like your project if you don't have good documentation or if you don't have an identity at all. So what do I mean by an identity? The first thing is the name, right? So you have to get that right. Like, I mean, you don't have to find a perfect name, but for me, when I was thinking of a name, I had this craziest idea. Like, everyone is naming their project from some kind of famous people mostly in English history or something. So they have Sinatra. Sinatra is a famous singer in US. So I said, why? I mean, I'm gonna pick someone from Turkish history. So I just picked Kemal, which is like Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the second name of the founder of Turkish Republic. And that's the image that when I was creating the project, had in my mind. Like, you see the fez on top of his head. So I said, I'm gonna make a logo, and I'm gonna make it a fez. And everyone was like, "Are you crazy?" And yeah, like maybe I'm crazy. Who knows? And then the thing is that you have to find a goal, like specific stuff that you want to solve. For example, I wanted this framework to be fast, effective, and simple, and that means you kind of take these as principles and build your identity or build your technical stuff around these goals. And these are also really important because, like, you have to keep it in this way so it doesn't end up like too big or too small. And then I have to actually find someone to draw the logo. I mean, it doesn't look so fancy, but it's so simple and kind of easy to get for Balkan people because they know the culture. But in the States, they just think it's a book and that's okay. I'm not offended. And next came the website. Like I said, we are building an identity, right? So you have to make it easy for people to actually discover what you are building, right? So a website is a must. So I kind of insistently poked my designer friend sitting next to me to build a website for Kemal, and I insisted too much that my backend developer friend built a website for Kemal, which is weird. But turned out that the backend developer had a good eye, and the website was pretty cool. And the point of all this stuff is like, first to make it work and make it right and make it fast. Like, but the thing is that you have to make it work somehow, and then the rest will come soon, eventually. For me, like, I had this kind of technical challenges. I mean, they're mostly related to code and architecture, but I thought I might share this. Like, when I was building the first working prototype of Kemal, you know, I was so naive and I didn't know anything about building a web framework or building a framework at all. So I just wrote some code, and turned out that my root handler, which is like the most critical part of a web framework, which actually looks up all the root table and finds out which part of the request to actually process. So my first implementation was just, you know, creating an array, putting all the roots inside the array and just looping over it every time. And that's a really, really silly idea. Don't do it if you are building a new framework. And I actually learned out later when someone is actually using Kemal and building a real thing. And I just, you know, make it right next time with changing that simple single line of code into something called radix tree, which is a really common tree structure in solving related, in holding related kind of data together. So roots are really kind of actually a tree structure. And then I actually read a lot about how to implement this radix stuff, etc., and then just, you know, write a lot of code to do so. But the point is that I didn't know that there's something called radix and I should use it from the start. I just, you know, learned it on the way. And the next thing is the most second important thing is parsing of an HTTP request, obviously. And this is my first shameful, you know, super naive implementation of parsing all that parameters from an HTTP request, like parsing query params, parsing URL, and parsing body params. But this was super ineffective and inefficient, and was really heavy on the CPU. Then the next thing is that how can I actually make this better? And then I just looked up a lot of other open source projects, read a lot of source code, and turned out that there is this thing called memoization, and I just applied that to my parser, and it sped up all the thing like 100 times. But again, the point is that you just find the problem and then you just learn it on the way that there's a better solution to what you actually built. And the thing is that you have to repeat this again and again, because building a product or building a framework is not just one-day work. You have to pick all the low-hanging fruits all the time. You have to solve issues, and you have to take care of the project all the times. You have to update the dependencies, and you have to avoid breaking changes as much as possible. And also, I feel like this is the most important thing about any project, especially any project on GitHub, because most of the people don't even care about your code quality or code metrics at all, because if you don't have good documentation, they are just going to ignore and close the tab, and you're not going to get any stars for your project. To make a project really a successful one, you have to write a lot of not a lot of, but you have to write good documentation, which should be easier to understand even for the newcomers, and which should be really simple to get it working. Like, for example, your project should be like just git cloning and then installing the dependencies and then just run. And that's a great starter point to get more people interested and finally contributing back to your project. Building a community is also really important. So the thing is that the project is actually not just the code, but more like the people using it, right? So you have to have a community kind of getting involved into this project that you are building, so that the project lives more than one day or just one, Reddit post lifetime. And to build a community, the most important thing is to share. Like, just speak to people and go to events and go to meetups. Come to Skopje, have some boza, and share what you know already. And it's all about talking to people and not just coding, because I feel like I spent not so much coding, but I spent a lot of time talking, and I feel like that's the better thing to do. Because if you are gonna sit in a room just code, no one is gonna find about what you are doing, right? And treat it as a product, you don't have to actually think like it's a technical code thingy, but more like a product. So you kinda, having a feature map for the project is a good thing, and it makes things easier for the coming people to understand, like what's the next thing to do, like what are you going to release next. It really makes stuff easier for the newcomers. And the good part is that if you're having a feature map, some people like from some weird country can come and just implement that feature before you actually know it. So that's a great thing about open source too. Eventually, maybe in 2 to 3 years time, you can have stats like this. This is not too much compared to something like Rails or Django, but this is the actual stats of Kemal right now. But I think combined, we have more than 1K commits, and we are close to 50 contributors. Closed more than 250 issues, and I merged like 184 pull requests. And this is the map of all contributors to Kemal. As you can see, there are lots of countries that I don't know the name of, but this is the power of open source, right? You can get a lot of people from everywhere. And eventually, like I said, once people start using your stuff, you can see it doing well in many other places that you didn't know before. For example, this something called Tech Empower Web Framework Benchmarks, and I saw Kemal on the list, and I was like, who the hell put this on this thing that I didn't know before? But turned out that it became on top, like doing really well. So eventually, if you work good, if you work not hard but smart and treat it as a product, you can have good results, and that's really good. And like after building Kemal for 3 years, I joined the Crystal Core team as a member. So yeah, you can also, for me it was like a dream to join the core team, but eventually it happened. And yeah, about the resources, we have a good documentation, like a book kind of thingy on Crystal Lang docs. if you are interested in crystal. And I wrote a small bookish thing called Crystal for a Beast. It's free, you can just read it in a single day. And we have a vibrant community on Gitter, so just join the chat on Kemal CR Kemal. And I have stickers, I forgot to put it on table, but be sure to grab them after the talk. And I'm writing a book about crystal, but it's still not finished, and I suck at writing books, I think, because it's hard to finish. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that very insightful presentation. And what a way, I cannot see any of you, I'm sorry. What a way to wrap up the presentation, right? And I feel like we owe them a big round of applause, the three of them. Thank you, guys. We are done with the presentation part of the evening, but now it's your turn. As we previously agreed, we're gonna have a Q&A. So I cannot see any of you right now, but somebody of the organization's organizer from InPlayer will see you. So if you have any question, just raise your hand. Yes, thank you. And there was light. Ве молам, крената рака и некој од организација ќе ви донесе микрофон. It's time for your insightful questions, I guess. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
For the challenge? Yeah, good. Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear
Hello.
you.
Hey, I've got a question for Jan. Sorry. Jan, you've been at the start of open source from the beginning. I mean, what do you see the world of software in 20 years' time?
You mean, I hope, is this thing on? Yeah. It is on, wonderful. You mean in the 20 years that happen or the 20 years that are coming? That are coming. I will celebrate the slow death of proprietary software. I will celebrate the Jurassic Parks of legacy software that nobody can maintain. And I foresee that there will be a few things happening. First of all, we will see easier access to things we nowadays call programming. It will become a very natural way of interacting with computers. So I think that being able to algorithmically plug stuff together becomes a natural habit for any person, and we will teach it at schools, and it will not be called programming anymore. It's just the way we will interact with technology. We will have compute power, raw compute power in the gigaflops per second for free effectively. So we can do very interesting and weird things. But it all will be, none of this will work when it's hidden away, when it's locked up in whatever closed thing. I think what I said in my presentation, the decision has been made that it will all be shareable and open. So I think computers will become a natural extension of our way of thinking, not of our body in that sense, but of our way of thinking, that we will use computer technology and the vast amounts of data we get open and free access to in ways we cannot predict right now. I'm not a futurist in the way that I think we will have 3D avatars running through the world and we will have all fantasies fulfilled. I don't believe that. I think there's also technology will take a step back in the next 20 years. It will become a natural thing to have to use, but it will not be in the focus, and it will not be as important and as, over-positioned, as made too important as it is right now. So it's going to be normal, but it's going to be extremely relevant to everything we do.
Thank you. Anybody else? Question?
Hey. Hello. I want to ask Visser a question.
Louder.
Okay, louder. I want to ask Visser a question. If someone from these young developers want to join Free Software Macedonia or Kika, what is that they have to do that? If they want to join the organization and they want to contribute your work.
Yeah, so you hear me?
No.
No.
Test. Okay. Yeah. So the easiest way is to come to some of our events. You can follow us at the blog I've shown you, or at our Twitter account. We put there updates on our events. Or if you just want to ask a question, you can Google or at Freenode on IRC. So, and another mechanism is so to ask on the mailing list, which I shown on the presentation. So basically, just come at some of one of our events, and I'm sure you will like it. So.
Thank you. Anybody else has a question?
Yeah.
Тука. Нашата убава хостеса Стефанија.
I have a question for Serdar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, loud.
Ај пробај уште еднаш?
Does this work?
Не. Можеш да викнеш? Или ја ќе викнам за тебе?
Пруба. Hello. Hi.
Yep.
So, is there any software we know of that is programmed in Crystal?
Let me think. Like that is mainstream. I think not. Like we are still not 1.0, but we are getting there. Like we have some big machine learning open source software written in Crystal, but I don't feel like it's being used mainstreamly yet. So unfortunately not. But we are getting there. Maybe in 5 or 10 years, because building something like that takes a lot of time. Right?
Just one more question, sorry.
Yeah.
If I want to join learning Crystal, do I need to learn Ruby first or
No.
just directly Crystal?
No, you don't have to learn Ruby first. It just helps you. But the thing is that Crystal is another language, and the thing is that if you know any compiled language like Java or C#, it really helps a lot, because it's the mindset of compiled languages that you need, and that's enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other question? Во прв ред. Sorry.
Here, over there, over there, over there.
I'm sorry for this.
Исто така можете и да кажувате овде сами да го користите гласот. Благодарам.
Hi, I wanted to come from the other point, because you were talking about all the positive things of open source. I have few of my apps that I've developed throughout the years, and I always had a problem implementing some of the open source frameworks, let's say. So at this time, where most of the software is not distributed physically, where you don't have to comply with the licenses, most of the software is hosted, and that it's not covered by the open source license. It actually stops developers like me competing on the market, and it actually disqualifies me from, compared to the other companies. And that, in a way, stops me. It stops a lot of developers from third world countries, like second or third world countries, in order to compete. So most of them work as outsourcing, and they contribute for some kind of feedback on open source projects, but that's not a financial feedback, So it's a big problem, and I think that's, in a way, it's in a nutshell, stops the further development of companies here.
Yeah, so I fully get your point, but we clearly have to separate the use of technology of a product and the license of the code it is written under. I fully agree that most of the APIs and stuff that you get access to use shitloads of open source underneath, but they give you access in a very proprietary way where you cannot see under the covers. This is a known issue in the GPL, in the old GPL. It's one of the reasons Affero went ahead and created the Affero GPL version, and now we have this more or less integrated into GPL version 3. Doesn't change the fact that the majority of these services will, if at all, give you access to maximum the APIs, but not the underlying software. Yes, that's a problem. I cannot stop that from a license perspective. This is a cultural perspective in these organizations. What I can do, and which has worked quite successfully, is simply re-implement the shit out of it as open source and create an open source alternative that ultimately can take over. That's sort of like reverse engineering. We saw Eucalyptus doing this with AWS. It didn't really work, but it was definitely a try. The other thing we can do is, if a company gets too powerful with this, or a service provider gets too powerful with this, is to force them via political lobbying to make that access open access and open data. I cannot stop people from proprietarizing and making money. That's not the idea behind open source. It's not a weapon that I take to go to whatever company and say, you stop doing this proprietary, you make everything open because here's the license. This is not how it works. It has to be a cultural and philosophical thing. Oh, why not? This is not the task of a license developer, of somebody creating a license. This is a task of governments, of regulations, and etc. I cannot do this as someone working as an open source guy.
I think, I mean, sorry for interrupting you, but I think that as a contributor myself, for example, if I work on some framework that's like, let's say, C++, like multimedia framework, and it's very hard actually as a single contributor to make a framework like that. And you have like 200 people working on it. In a way, you are giving away a very big intellectual property to a company that will be able to take it forward, market it, and may position themselves on the market in a way that you will never be able to do it. And what I'm proposing is to have as every contributor to have a micro license attached to the code that they change. So for example, if I make change into Red Hat Linux, I attach a micro license to the changes I did on the commit I did, and that will stop a company that has a turnover more than, let's say, $100,000 from using the code of Red Hat. In your case, as a Red Hat, for example, I was using it with discrete logic. So, like, let's say discrete logic is a multi-million company that was sold to Autodesk. You were a proprietary system together as an inbound, like a turnkey system with that company. So in order to buy discrete flame, you had to buy Red Hat. And that was a very customized kernel of Red Hat that worked with it. So I don't buy it, you know, I'm trying to buy it, but I don't buy the whole thing. I think there's something more to it, you know?
Definitely, You know, the thing is, first of all, when a company tells you you have to buy this whatever specific subscription of Red Hat or else there is no support, that's not something I can influence. You know, I just produce, I'm here representing Red Hat, and we sell subscriptions ideally directly to customers. We hate bundling just because of the reasons you described. On the other hand, you're always free. It's because everything Red Hat does is open source. You're always free to take the source code, compile it yourself, and use it in your own way. A lot of customers are doing this with CentOS, with Fedora, and etc. We have to prove a value, and our business is support and services and not software. So by always giving this opportunity and giving this perspective, we try to do the best in a world that is not simple. We're not politicians, we not set the rules, we do not do this. We have to survive in this in a way that we also have to make money, don't get me wrong. We are a company, we have 12,000 employees that we want to pay their money every month in the best possible and fairest possible way, which is not always the best possible and fairest way for every use case. We have to make a compromise on that. And I think we are right now doing the right compromises, but of course I would love to go far further and etc., but I cannot. There are some constrictions around this. However, what I can tell you is, if a company does such weird things like bundling stuff with highly patched and whatever, I would walk away from them and I would never buy from them. And if they are in a position where they can tell you, you must buy from us or else nothing works, then there is definitely another problem, a problem that I cannot solve. Sorry, I cannot.
That's probably the case when the solution is simple, but like, for example, in video editing software, which I'm doing, it's a bit hard because you have only 2 or 3 players on the market, and you have all these 264 codecs and MPEG-2 consortium. So they're always chasing you if you do something about it. You have the FFmpeg, which is an open source thing, but they also stop you from using it in a commercial project. So you're stuck from every end. Wherever you look like, you're stuck as a developer, I'm saying. There is no way as a single developer to start up a venture that will make money if you haven't got like, let's say maybe 20 or 30 developers doing something from scratch and giving away your efforts to a project that's publicly there, but maybe the license, the actual person that put the project as an open source keeps the license in the first place. That changes that you're going to make will go back to the proprietary service, and that will be released. So that's why, I mean, I'll just end, I'm a bit pessimistic. I hope it's going to change, but you're doing great stuff, So
we try, so first of all, I am more a free software than an open source guy. I am more a GPL than I'm BSD. And being a GPL person, you know, this is actually, interestingly, this is one of the reasons Red Hat as a company became successful, because we insisted on the GPL, on giving everything back that we get. We thought we would never get a good relationship with upstream developers if we do not force ourselves to give everything back. We do not want to create this impression that we take the work from the community and then we effectively say, fuck you all, let's make money like hell and not do anything. It might look from the outside. When I started at Red Hat, we were doing 30-something million in revenue per year, and we were 600 people worldwide. Now we are 12,000 people in Red Hat, and we're doing $3 billion in revenue with selling free software. But you also see everything we do, we give back to the community and we share with the community. Every new product we do is a completely open source from beginning to end. It's not a perfect solution, but at least is, for me, from a moral perspective, it's an acceptable solution. I can justify making money with open source the way Red Hat does. And that's good enough for me. I cannot speak for the rest of the world. Other people might be more fundamentalist about it, perfectly fine. But for me, it is an acceptable compromise. I want every developer to be able to participate. This is how we hire people at Red Hat. We look at upstream communities, at upstream projects that are relevant for our products. And then we tell these developers, we really go into the communities and we look at the Git commits and all that stuff. And then we say, this guy or this girl is doing really good work. We go to them and we say, how about you continue to work for your upstream community, and you do 10% of backporting work for getting your stuff into Red Hat, and we're going to give you a full payment for that, no matter where you are on this planet. That's our way also of giving back, by hiring these people. They do not really work for Red Hat, they work for the upstream projects, but Red Hat pays them because ultimately it's good for a product. There are different ways to finding compromises, and some of them are good, and there will always be people who criticize whatever you do, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But I think we are doing it at least better than a lot of other companies. That's all, and that's all I can hope for.
Thank you very much, guys. Zip, do we have time for one more question, or are we done? Okay, we have.
Okay, the question is about the licenses.
Yes, but the others can.
The other no.
Okay.
Everybody can.
About the licenses, you said one thing before, that you cannot force people to contribute. You have to make a cultural change. And the licenses, BSD and GPL, I think the GPL is more like trying to force people to contribute back. Yeah. And BSD is like, okay, we have a culture that if you think that this is useful, contribute to it. If don't, you don't have to. But if you think that it is contribute to that, the contributions that other people will give into, plus your contributions to the software, will make it worthwhile for you to invest in inside to give back to the community. So, why do you think that it's a cultural change that needs to happen, but still prefer GPL? Like,
all right, so I'll give you the short form, and please correct me if I'm wrong. You're closer to software freedom and etc. When I started working with open source free software, you know, I interchanged those terms frequently. There is a difference, but in my case, it's not that relevant. When I did this, the problem with BSD was very simple. Now we're talking 1990s, end of 1990s. The problem with BSD is what we saw, what Microsoft did, what Apple did, and what IBM did. They took BSD licensed software, and because they knew they did not have to give back, they created forks, and they put their paid developers on this work, outnumbering the community, proprietarily occupying the community, taking it away from the community, and that's it. You know, this software was never seen again. That's the stuff that happened with Windows NT. GPL was created specifically to disincentivize that behavior, to make sure that if you want to use the GPL code, you must give back, and there's no way out. Either you accept it or you don't contribute. Very simple. Now we are in 2018. Now we have the companies that understand that they cannot simply occupy BSD licensed stuff, fork it away, and do their own stuff. Because now the culture has changed, and upstream developers and everybody who is developing wants to contribute back. 10 years ago, when you said to your manager, I wrote a patch for whatever BSD or GPL licensed software, and I want to give it back to the upstream community, the manager would say, are you fucking crazy? We cannot do this. We have to talk to legal. We don't even have any contracts with this. There's a liability risk, blah, 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 blah. We are slowly but surely working to sort that out, to make sure that people can do this as a normal part of their work. As I said in my presentation, if it's in at 80% and it's non-competitive, make it easy to share. So the whole conflict behind the difference between GPL and BSD, on that level, there are other conflicts that I will not talk about, but on that level, does it risk destroying a community that is healthy or not out there just because there's a company with money? That risk is reduced nowadays because companies respect the spirit and the culture of open source and they don't look too closely on the license. It was different in the past, it's different today, and I hope it will stay the way it is now. Ultimately, there will always be people that take advantage of any open source community. I programmed, okay, any PHP developers in the room? Are there old people in the room? Old people, PHP? Yeah, I'm old too. So there was this, anyone here remember the e-commerce solution called OS Commerce? OS Commerce, anyone raise your hands? Anybody heard of OS Commerce? Yeah, I was one of the core developers of OS Commerce. When you ever worked with OS Commerce and you ripped your hair out about how it handles text and sends email, that's me, that was my code. That was GPL licensed. OS Commerce was completely GPL version 2 or later licensed, everything. We had a group in Germany that took our source code, simply changed all the copyright notices in every single source file, claimed it's now BSD licensed, and they own the copyright. I went to a German court, and I said, no way. You know, do something. And the judge looked at it and it took him 5 minutes and he said, there is no case here, it's decided, I am right, they are wrong. With BSD, I would never have gone to court with that because it would be impossible. So from that perspective, GPL is more close to my heart, maybe not from a commercial side, but from an emotional side. That's why I'm more a GPL person than a BSD person. GPL gives me more weapons to defend the freedom that I care about. And the BSD people say, but that's not the right freedom, and this holy war between BSD and GPL is now running since 30 years and it will never be solved. That's my opinion. I'm really sorry for that. Interjection.
Yep.
Because of this dualism, GPL and
Bizarre.
Microphone, please.
Test. Okay. So because of this BSD GPL dualism, we have the most used OS operating system. It's not Linux, it's not Windows, it's Minix. Because I don't know if you know, but in the recent Intel processors, they put Minix code, modified Minix code. They even hired Tannenbaum as a consultant, and basically Intel can spy on you without even knowing. Whatever operating system you run, you will never know because of this. So this is.
Tannenbaum was not happy about that,
yes.
By the way. He complained about that. He got a few questions that he answered, and it was from Intel people, but he never knew they would put it in UEFI and use it there, and etc. He was not happy about it.
Yes, but because of the BSD license or MIT or whatever Minix is, this happened.
Yeah.
If it was GPL, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That's why I'm definitely more a GPL than a BSD guy. Fight me for it. I'm used to it.
Okay, so now we have time for one more question.
Yeah. Philosophical cultural difference. The BSD, as I said, it's a holy war that is going on since 30 years and it will go on forever. But ultimately it doesn't really, you know, I don't think it's that relevant because everybody is using open source now, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. You guys can continue with this discussion later on.
Outside, 2 cigarettes, 5 beer.
We have time for one more question, please.
Hi.
If any, yeah.
The closing question.
One question.
Closing question.
One only. It's not my question. It's a borrowed one.
Is it a voice in your head? If it is, ignore it.
Okay, I'll be quick. I was on a conference. There was a girl from Switzerland holding the Open Scala thing there, the initiative, and she had a presentation which was kind of heartbreaking. It was like the story no one tells you. And it had a lot of statistics, and the question from that presentation was, from the open source infrastructure that use today. A lot of stuff that companies use in production is open source. We all know that.
Yeah.
But there are some niches of the open source stack which are actually which don't get that much attention. For example, new hype stuff as Crystal is great. People adopt it, and it's self-hosted, easy to learn and to include yourself in it.
So what's the question?
The question is about stuff as OpenSSL and stuff like that. Her example was OpenSSL because everyone uses it, and in a certain point it had like 9 developers working on it. And everything, like your fridge uses it, and the airplane uses it, and it has 9 developers for that part.
Yeah.
That was my question. Actually, the question is how to motivate people to get into specific niche stuff, which are actually hard to get into.
Well, I have an arrogant and I have an honest reply. The arrogant reply is a lot of these niche projects that consist of very small teams unfortunately tend to be very isolated teams that are not really good at communicating with the outside world. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. With OpenSSL, you know, there is boring SSL, and there are a lot of other forks popping up, which came out of the realization that there are just a few people working on OpenSSL, and everybody's using it, but there are problems with OpenSSL that have been known for a long time, but these 9 developers have decided that whoever criticizes them must be an idiot. I'm a little bit exaggerating. So it's also an attitude problem. And so the honest answer is, VHS was worse than Video 2000 and Betamax, but it still won the market. You don't know how markets work. What projects become attractive, what projects become not attractive, you cannot predict it. There is some open source software out there where I say, kill it with fire, because nobody should use it. PHP is one of them, you can quote me on that. But this is how stuff works, this is how the market works. And you cannot stop it, and you can only, convincing goes this far, but ultimately the market decides, and the market in free software and open source is not different from a normal market. The market is not rational. People do crazy things all the time, sorry. Let's drink more beer and be happy. It's, you know,
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for being here, for your insightful questions. Thank you for being part of the 5th InTech meetup organized by InPlayer. A round of applause for them. I know you're probably very tired by now, so now I invite you for meze and pivo in the bar. Thank you.